Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the Basic Irrigation Operation and Maintenance webinar. My name is Maggie Gahn, and I am the Water Conservation Program Assistant for Manatee County's Extension Service. I work with Valerie Massey, the Landscape Program Assistant, and Michelle Atkinson, the Environmental Horticulture Agent at the Extension, and we make up the mobile irrigation lab, and we do free evaluations of your irrigation system and landscape. And we are happy that you guys are attending today, so thank you for your time. Okay, so the objectives today, so we're going over basic irrigation and maintenance. We are going to be reviewing irrigation terms. We're going to be teaching you components of your irrigation system. We'll teach you a little bit about how to operate your controller and how to maintain your system. All right, so why do we even need to worry about our irrigation system? Why do we need to maintain them? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Florida is a land of weather extremes. So we either get super, super wet or we are super, super dry and hot. So water is essential to care for our landscapes, and our landscapes do call for about 30% of our property value. So we all care about our property. Florida soil can have great drainage. We have nice sandy, loam soils, nutrient-rich soils, or very poor soils like clay. A lot of the new developments we see can tend to have a little bit more of that clay soil. So landscapes can contain plants also that are not adapted to our environment. So for instance, we have this picture here of these pretty red petunias, but these aren't necessarily going to thrive in Florida. They do prefer a cooler, drier climate. So we tend to overwater things like this. But the solution to that would be swapping that out for a plant that's more Florida friendly, that can tolerate the heat, can tolerate our soils, rather than drenching them in water that really isn't actually going to do much for them. And also another major important reason why we need to maintain proper practices is potable water is a non-renewable resource, and a lot of irrigation systems out there are using potable water. And most importantly, our outdoor water use accounts for up to half of the publicly supplied drinking water in Florida. So our irrigation systems use a lot of water. It's the largest appliance you're ever going to buy for your house. So using it properly and responsibly is going to be very important. I also like to point out a lot has changed in Florida over the years. This graphic to the left is Florida in 1940s, it's Bayshore Gardens area. We don't see many houses there, do we? And now in 2020, you can see that we have drastically changed that landscape. We have altered the way we use water, the way water flows. We've lost some wetlands to pavement and unpermeable surfaces. So using water responsibly is important, especially when we are altering our landscape. And this is a nice graphic. I think it's just nice to highlight the hydrologic cycle. So you see the wetlands in there. So those act as the kidneys of our land, of our earth. And so they will filter out any impurities, any fertilizers. They keep the water healthy. And so when we lose those, we don't really have anything in place to be filtering our water for us. So everything essentially is going back into the aquifer, including runoff. So using proper maintenance practices are going to be very helpful. So question 1, I want to see some hands raised. What is the difference between potable and non-potable water? Do we know? Potable water has been filtered This is drinking water. This is what we need to live. Non-potable water is water like reclaimed water, water that we see in ponds and things of that nature. So it is definitely very important for us to conserve and protect our potable water source. All right, so if you look at the Earth, a graphic, a satellite image, it looks like it's all blue and it's a bunch of water out there. Yes, we have a lot of water, but 97% of that is salt water. Salt water, obviously, we can't drink salt water. Plants don't necessarily thrive in salt water. There are salt tolerant plants, but that doesn't mean they can just live in salt water. So 90%, 97% of all water on Earth is salt water. And 2/3 of all of our fresh water is actually frozen. So that is glaciers and things of that nature. So we don't really have access to them yet. With climate change, you know, they are melting, but that's a different story. I won't go into that. But so only 1% of all water on Earth is potable and is accessible to us. So we need to make a conscious effort to protect that 1% of water. So, landscape irrigation system. We all love to have nice green grass, right? Nice healthy plants. So this is the largest appliance you will ever buy. 50% of your home's water use will go to your irrigation system. This, we like to just set it and forget it, and then that can lead to wasteful practices. There's a statistic in here, 24% of Florida's freshwater withdrawal is in April and May. So be on the lookout. I mean, we tend to get quite a bit of rain in May, so you don't necessarily need to run your system. But just don't set it to auto and let it run however it wants, because you may forget to check on it and check for leaks and things of that nature. All right, so this next slide is going to be pretty word heavy. I just wanted to put in here some irrigation terms. I can send you the PDF of this presentation so that you can read all these, but I'm not going to read this one by one. But some important ones to know are your application rate. That's the amount of water that is going to be applied to that zone, that turf area. And also something to take note of is the arc. So every sprinkler sprays like an arc, and you have different degrees at which your nozzles are set to, and that will determine where they're spraying and how much they're spraying. We have automatic irrigation controller, backflow preventer, that'll prevent water from being contaminated in the mainline system. You have drip irrigation. More words. We have precipitation rate, head-to-head coverage. This is very important. So we have the arc. So there's water that's not being applied underneath that arc. So your head-to-head coverage needs to be thought of. So you need to make sure that heads are placed close enough together that you're capturing water all over and not just in certain spots. And we'll go more into that. So these are more terms. All right, so some interesting facts for you. So based on over 2,000 irrigation evaluations, approximately 1/3 of irrigation water is wasted due to inefficient design and maintenance. So we tend to forget when our sprinklers come on. A lot of the time they're set early morning, so we don't necessarily see our systems come on. But it is important to check your system every once in a while, at least a few times a year, because you might have leaks and clogs and breaks that you don't even know about. And that is just wasting so much water that could be put to better use. So we have the mobile irrigation lab, and we come out to your house and we will evaluate your irrigation system for free. And also Valerie, she will be doing the landscape evaluation. Hand in hand, landscape and irrigation go together. So we will give you a full report for free, and report any breaks or leaks that we find. But it is important for you yourself to check on your own system. You're the one paying for it. So just don't forget about it. All right. So some considerations, your system pressure. So this is definitely important, absolutely important. This is what drives your whole system. So this is what is going to cause that water to flow and spray out of your sprinklers. So if you have low pressure, some heads may not be popping up and actually doing their job. If you have high pressure, you may have some heads that are emitting a mist, and mists aren't necessarily efficient for watering your turf. So the mist will get into the air and not actually to the turf. It's just not efficient for a proper application. Something else to consider are your existing valves. So unfortunately, there's not a specific location where these are every time. There's no standard for irrigation design, so you'd have to ask who installed your system where they are if you can't find them. Usually they'll be close to your controller, hopefully, but it's hard to place them sometimes. So just be sure that you check on those if you can find them. Other considerations, electrical wires, where are they? They're usually near the valves and leading from your controller, so check on those. You don't want anything bad happening to them. And considerations, how many zones, how many irrigation heads are within the zone? If you have too many heads in a zone, you may not be, all those heads might not be getting enough pressure to emit efficient application rates. And your controller, make sure it's working. Make sure you have a backup battery in there. I'll go a little bit more into that next few slides. Just making sure that that's working properly and you have it set properly. And your rain sensing device, that's what this image is to the right is. That's a rain sensor, and so what that does, it acts as a automatic rain gauge for you. So that will measure the amount of rainfall that you're getting, and if it hasn't adequate enough moisture, it's going to turn off your system because you don't need to be running your irrigation system while it is raining. There's actually an ordinance in Manatee County that you are not allowed to be running your irrigation while it's raining. But your rain sensing device, it's a ring of corks on the inside. So once they dry out, it'll turn your system back on. All right. And so before you start digging, so if you are changing up your system or you're planting some big trees, be sure that you call 811. This is a free service that will locate your utility lines. If you dig into a line and you break it, that is going to be very expensive. So be sure that you call 811 before you dig. You can tell them what you're planning on doing, point out your areas, but this is a free service, so please take advantage of it if you are going to be altering your landscape. All right, so our irrigation system components. So we have the water meter, which is either from the county or the city, or whatever else. You have your backflow preventer, and that is the property owner's responsibility to make sure that that is intact and it is working. Your backflow preventer is very essential to your system. That is making sure that nothing bad is getting sucked back into the main line. You don't want anything to contaminate your drinking water. Another major component is your controller. There's a lot of controllers out there. Your distribution lines, usually PVC piping, polytubing, and that's something you don't necessarily see. So making sure that you're checking on your system, again, is important because a lot of this stuff that you can't actually physically see, like your control valves. You have your irrigation moisture interrupt sensor, and there's multiple types of those, and we'll go more into those. And your irrigation heads, a few different types that you can see in the landscape. You have spray heads that just emit like a fan and are stationary. You have rotary heads, what we call rotors, and they will rotate. and spray at a certain angle. And then we have micro irrigation. There's a few different types of micro irrigation you'll see. All right, and everybody loves a good graphic, so here's a great one. So where you start is at your water meter. So this is where your water is coming into, and sometimes you will have one line that is going to your house for potable drinking water, and you might have another potable line for your irrigation system. And so then this is where you want to check out your pressure rates. You need to determine how much pressure you have, because that is the driving force behind your irrigation system. Rotors are going to be taking more pressure than your spray heads would be. You can put more spray zone than you can rotors, so making sure that you can determine your pressure is going to be pretty essential to determine what your zones will look like. Past this, you have your valve, which releases the water. And then you have a pressure regulator past your backflow. So like I said, the backflow will prevent anything getting backwashed into the main line. And that's really important because these heads pop back into the ground level. So there can be fertilizer, pesticides, pet droppings can be sitting on those heads, and that can get retracted and back into the system. But your backflow preventer will prevent that. Okay, so past your backflow preventer is your pressure regulator. And then you have a master valve, which turns the system on. And so that will release water, or that will stop the water. And from there, you go to your valve box. Each zone will have a valve. So if you have 5 zones, you're going to have 5 valves. If you have 3 valves, you're going to have 3 zones. So once you get to that, you're going to get to your zones, and you'll have something like this, a rotor. That's what it looks like to me. And then past here, you have the spray head. And then, let me backtrack. Your valves are going to go back up to your controller. There's electric wiring here that signals to your controller. So your controller will say, turn the system on, release the valve, turn the system off, close the valve. And then whether it's on or off, your sprinklers will be going or not. From your controller, you have your rain sensing devices. It can be wireless, it can be hardwired. It just depends on controller you have and its capabilities. So this is what your water meter box will look like. So usually we'll say water meter. Sometimes you might have to dig around for it. Sometimes they'll be covered in dirt and mud. And so you just want to make sure it's clean and you can read it. It's going to be important to have access to this. If you have a high water bill, you might want to check out your meter while you're running your system to see how fast it's spinning. If it's spinning really, really fast, then you might have a break or a leak. But call the mobile irrigation lab and we can help a little bit more with that. All right, so you have one side that connects to the main water main, you got another side that connects to your home or to your irrigation system. All right, so let's see if anybody knows the answer to this question. What is the home or property owner's responsibility regarding the backflow preventer? You need your backflow preventer inspected annually by a licensed professional. So you can maintain it, you can check for leaks and breaks, but ultimately you need a professional to inspect it. Irrigation system controllers. There are bunches and bunches and bunches. So as you can see in this picture, there's probably about 20 different ones. So you have some old school ones like this here that has the little pegs. I encountered my first one recently, and that was pretty fun to learn. So you have one of those, but they will last a long time. You can have your kind of in the middle ones that aren't necessarily wireless, but they're a little bit more advanced than that peg system. And then we do have some that are wireless and that you can just use with your phone. So there are some, those are what we call smart controllers, but there is plenty for you to choose from. And I did want to point out that we do have also battery powered irrigation controllers. So something like this would come in handy if you have all of your zones hooked up, you have 5 zones and it's all spray heads or rotors. But then you decide you want to plant some really pretty landscape beds. Landscape beds, we recommend only using micro irrigation in a system like that. So if you needed to add an extra zone for micro, you can hook this up to a hose bib and use that to power your micro irrigation system. All right, so this is our typical installation that we see. A lot of these new houses I see are getting the X core. This has been a really common one I've been seeing a lot. So you have the valve that is releasing and controlling the sprinkler heads, and those are going to be hooked up to your controller. And so your controller is going to have your programs that is going to signal to the valves when to turn them off, when to turn them on. So make sure that you are checking on your system once in a while, making sure that it's on at proper times, off at times it's supposed to be off, like if it's raining. And once in a while, I would open up the guts of it. So you'll see that there are some wiring and usually where you put your backup battery, but a lot of critters like to live in there. So make sure that you don't get any roomies that are going to mess up your wiring there. Keep it nice and clean. All right. And then, like I said, inspect this guy. A lot of these colorful wires you see over here, these are for each zone. So it looks like this has about 8 zones. Usually this area is where you put the backup battery. All right. And what's really great to have with your controller is your manual. So you might have a dusty old manual hanging around, but now in the age of Google, you can just Google it and find it online very easily. So a lot of these makers have made it very accessible for you. So definitely take a peek at that and it'll really help you out if you need to reset it or anything. All right, so your automatic irrigation controller, this system is time-based. So everything is according to minutes. So it'll run your system based on the time that you tell it to. So you will tell it the day to run, you will tell it the time to run, how many times a week, and for how long. So it's all on what you program in here. This does not know what's going on weather-wise, doesn't know what season it is, and it does not know your soil moisture level. These are things that you would have to get add-ons for. So that would be like a weather station or a rain sensor or a soil moisture sensor that you would have to hook up to your controller for it to know that. It does not know that all by itself. All right, and so some more pictures for you. So this backup battery, like I said, very important to have. So if we lose power and your system is off and you don't have a backup battery in there, the most popular, most common emergency setting that it'll reset your system to once your power comes back on is it'll run your system every day, every zone for 5 minutes. And that's not ideal in terms of water conservation, right? So having a backup battery, it will not do that. It's going to save what you have programmed in there and you won't need to worry. You won't be getting a giant water bill or anything like that. It'll keep your program. All right, so we have some really, really great publications that go more in depth about your controller and how to operate it. If you type anything into Google, if you type residential irrigation controller UF, you can usually find a lot of resources and articles. I have a link in here if you do want the PDF of this that you can access it through here. So you have your start time, program start times. So each of these, if you put time on it, it's going to run your whole system So say you have program 1 and program 2 set, one at 5 a.m., one at 7 a.m. It's going to run your entire system at 5 a.m. and then again at 7 a.m. And that is not necessary unless you have a giant plot of land, like hundreds of acres, or it's just not necessary for residential landscapes. So set one start time, leave the others at 0. You do not need to get messy and have all different times going on. So just set one start time. All right, and so next thing to go over is you have days that you can water. So in Florida, you are allowed to water 2 days a week. You don't need to water 2 days a week. We recommend you water 1 day a week. We'll go more into that, but so you're allowed to water 2 days a week. So what you would do is you can just move the nozzle to the day you want, and there's the arrow. You press it up to turn it on, down for off, and just repeat throughout the days that you need. And just be sure that you check your days and make sure that you know which days that your irrigation system's coming on and what days it should not be coming on. All right, does anybody know what the current watering days for residential homes in Manatee County are? Let's find out. Okay, so the Southwest Florida Water Management District manages water. I think they have about 13 counties that they're in charge of, and that's a state government. So they have set rules in place for us. This does not include reclaimed water. So watering days in Manatee County for even addresses are Thursday and Sunday, or Sunday. I would pick one. And if your house is an odd number, Wednesday and or Saturday. Okay, so businesses or HOA common areas are Tuesday and or Friday. All right, so if your house is 482 30th Ave or whatever, you would have Thursday or Sunday as your watering days. You want to ensure that on those days you're watering before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m. Between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. are the hottest time of the day. So water is evaporating from your landscape, and obviously you don't want that because you want those roots to be absorbing the water. Hand watering and micro irrigation, that is fine. You can water those anytime you'd like. And then if you are revamping your landscape, having new plantings and such, you have a 60-day establishment provision. So just make sure that you contact utilities to let them know that you're going to be putting in new plants so they don't send you a ticket for overwatering. And we do typically recommend early morning waterings. What day to water? A little more in depth. So I want to first talk about these pictures that I have over to the left. So I'm sure we have all seen this round little guy pop up in our grass. That is what we call dollar weed. That's usually an indicator that you're overwatering. That guy loves water, and it'll start popping up once there's a lot of water in a soil. And then these footprints in the grass usually indicate your system's it's a little dry. Your soil and your grass, it's wanting a little bit of water. So if you're leaving footprints in the grass, I would maybe give it a little water. But to repeat myself, just water on days allowed, only as needed. You don't have to run 2 days a week. You don't even have to run 1 day a week. If we're getting a lot of rain, you don't need to run your system. Only run as needed. The whole purpose of your irrigation system is to replenish the root zone when it's not raining. Irrigation systems are supplemental, so they are just helping out our yards for when we're not receiving enough rain. So just remember that we can't rely just on irrigation system. So what time should I water? So going more in depth to what Southwest Water Management District has put in place for us. So not irrigating between 10 a.m. or 4 p.m. This avoids wasting water due to excessive evaporation. And also watering late afternoons and morning extends the natural dew period and can accelerate season occurrence. So late mornings, late afternoons, stray away from that. And this is only for one full run of your irrigation system. This doesn't mean you can run your system all day long. This is just for one run. All right, so how long do I run my zones? There is a great way that you can find that out for yourself. It does take a little bit of math. I'm not a math whiz myself. So we're going to go over how to calibrate your zones. So your system will either call it zones or stations. So this system has 4 stations. Looks like the time is set for 27 minutes there. So ideally you want each zone to run long enough to get about 3/4 of an inch of water per cycle. If your soil is very, very sandy, you may want to go a little longer, maybe inch to a half, maybe. And don't forget that the controller is minutes, so it's not going to know when it receives 3/4 of an inch of water. So that's why we like to calibrate our zones. And this can be used by tuna cans, like in the picture there. They're measuring to see how much water they've captured, or rain gauges. All right. So what you do is you're going to run each zone for about 10 minutes, set cans out randomly into that irrigation zone. It needs to be anything with a flat bottom. We do have some what we like to call little calibration kits. So if you do need one, we can definitely send one your way, or you can come pick one up. But these here have measurements on the side. They're like measuring cups. That will show you how much water has been captured. You can also use just what you have at home. Tuna cans, cat food cans, just anything with a flat bottom. And you're going to set those out randomly in the zones. All right, and run it for about 10 minutes and then go check on some and make sure that they have about 3/4 of an inch of water. If in 10 minutes you have received 1/4 of an inch of water, you could probably safely assume that you need to run your system for 30 minutes. All right, and of course, be sure to check periodically so water is not wasted. All right, and then however long it took to capture 3/4 of an inch of water, that is the zone's runtime. All right, so rain sensing devices, there's quite a few different types and different models of those types. This is a great graphic here of the rain sensor. You can see inside of it. This is the most common that I see, and I would advise you to check on this once in a while. It's either going to be at the eave of your house here, or it's on a stake on the side of your house, but inside is a ring of corks, and these can get dried out. And if those are deteriorated, they're not going to work. So make sure your rain sensor is working. But this here is a weather station. So this is capturing wind, rain, and it can even have local data that it's reading as well. All right. And then you have a soil moisture sensor too that is actually buried underneath your grass, and that is measuring the moisture levels of your soil. And this studies show that this is probably the most accurate, most effective way to conserve water. It's going to give you the best read of really how your grass is doing and how much water it's receiving. All right, so what do each of these devices do? So your rain sensor keeps the irrigation system off after it receives adequate rainfall. And your rain sensor, typically you can set it to how much water, how much rainfall you want it to capture. So set it to 3/4 of an inch and you're good to go. Soil moisture sensor. This keeps your irrigation system off once soil is adequately saturated, and your weather station signals your irrigation system turn off based upon weather data. And sometimes those do require a subscription. Do homes that have an irrigation system connected to an operational controller require an operational moisture interrupt device? The answer is yes. Every home that has an in-ground irrigation system is required by Florida statute to have a operational moisture interruption device. So rain sensors, the most common that we see, it's required by Florida law, shuts off your irrigation system once it gets that rainfall. So you can see here, this one, it has a little satellite, or so this one is a wireless device. This one is typical one that we see. It's wired to your controller and has those rings inside, just like that one does too. All right. And location. This is very, very important for the rain sensor. So on the very left, we have proper location on the eave of the house. You want it open to the sky. You want it to be able to get rainfall without any blockage. And you don't want it anywhere where it may get dried out quicker. So you have this one here. It's fine on the stake, but it's just too close to that AC unit. So those are that's pumping out hot air, and what's inside of those? Cork, and cork gets dry. So the hot air is drying those corks out, and it's not letting the rain sensor do its job. So, you know, maybe placing it 5 feet away would be a better location, but I do advise you to be careful about putting it near plants, putting it near bushes that may grow over it, putting it under the eave of the house. You want it open to the sky and free from plants. So this rain sensor here is definitely not getting to do its job because that big leaf is blocking it. So make sure that you are putting that in the proper location so that you're saving water, that your system's being turned off when it's raining. All right, and next we have our soil moisture sensor. So this one is in ground. Usually once they install it, they'll let you know where it is. Usually in the front yard, an area that kind of is going to be getting a good bit of water, typical of the other areas in the landscape. So it's going to be measuring your soil moisture at the root zone. It's going to override your controller when the soil moisture content exceeds the program's soil moisture threshold. So usually they come with an extra device, and on that device you can set the moisture percentage that you want it to hit before it turns off your controller. So the sensor is going to be in about 5 feet from your irrigation heads, and you may need to adjust it to soil type, but this has shown to save the most water. It's a little pricier than your typical rain sensor, but it may save you a little bit more water. Costs about $139 to install. And we have another great article here about it. So like I said earlier, go to Google, type in soil moisture sensor UF, and it'll probably bring you to that publication. All right, and so now we go into weather-based control. So this is reading evapotranspiration. Say that 3 times fast. This is a evapotranspiration reader, and so this is combined process of evaporation and transpiration. So water is transferred from the soil and the plant surfaces into the atmosphere as water vapor. That's what that's reading. So it is taking account in temperature, humidity, wind, solar radiation. A lot of the time it's going to be hooked up to weather data. You just want to make sure that it is hooked up to local weather data. And of course, we have another publication about that. So go to Google, WeatherBased Irrigation Control UF, and you should be able to find that publication. All right, so this can save about, I'd say 40% water, depending on if it's in the right, if it's pulling the right data, if it's pulling local data. You don't want to have your reader to be based out of Tampa because they're getting different amounts of rain than we are here. So just make sure that whatever data you're using is local to you. Subscriptions can be about $4, $5 a month. So that's just something to consider if you want to pay that every month versus the soil moisture sensor, rain sensor. That's a one-time cost. You don't have to pay overtime for that. And these are a little bit pricier to install as well. And if you don't have any of those right now in place, use a rain gauge. We have these free for you. So if you want to pick one up, or if you want us to give you one, just let us know and we can. So what you do is you set it out somewhere open to rainfall, like a rain sensor. You don't want it to be blocked by any plants or any hard surfaces, any eave of the house. So if you get about 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch a week, for that week, you can turn off your irrigation system. So each week you need to dump it out so that it's just not over accumulating and you're not paying attention to it. So this does not replace the need for rain sensing devices. This is something you can use if the guy can't come out to you in a couple weeks. This won't replace the rain sensor, soil moisture sensor, weather-based control. This is just something you can use to keep an eye on things, or just for fun if you just want to know how much rainfall you got. Another article here is letting your lawn tell you when to water. This is a really good one. All right. And so we go more in depth about the control valves. So each valve is controlling the water flow for each zone. It's usually electric, but it can also be manual. For a mobile irrigation lab evaluation, you must have electric valves. They cannot be manual, unfortunately. So you see there's 5 valves here, so they must have 5 zones. All right, so there's a video here linked. Of course, if you get the PDF of this presentation, feel free to watch it. I will not be playing here at this moment. So they have an electric magnet switch that turns them on and off. And a major thing to point out is a filter. These filters can get clogged, especially if you are on well or if you are using reclaimed water. Pay attention to these. You might want to clean them out once in a while if you see your system's getting a little funky. That's something that can get clogged fairly easy. All right. And so now we're going to be going a bit into effective irrigation zones. I know that this looks a little overwhelming, all these lines and circles. Each of these dark gray circles are a sprinkler head. All right, and so these areas are what I'm referring to as zones. So this is depicting head-to-head coverage. So you have the sprinkler here, and this is going about 180. They have half circles around them, okay? And so then you're going to put a head over here to ensure that this, under the arc of the sprinkler, is getting water. So this is something that you want to pay attention to when you are designing your irrigation zones, okay? And take note of how these are laid out. So you have different zones in common areas. So you wouldn't want one zone to go around your whole house. You're going to have no pressure. All of those sprinkler heads aren't going to be coming on. So this is divided up. Each zone is divided up to apply proper pressure. And you can see back here in the landscape, they have what it looks to be drip tube. They have micro irrigation landscape bed, and that's going to be always on its separate zone. You always want micro to be on a separate zone from spray heads and rotors because they all have different pressures. They all are emitting differently. All right, so more about uniform coverage, this head-to-head coverage we referred to. This picture is showing you what that does not look like. You can see that that sidewalk is getting watered pretty well, and you can see how it's kind of arcing, and this strip of grass by the sidewalk really isn't getting much water because this arc is not necessarily hitting it. It's hitting more so of the sidewalk. So you want those to be, each end of the arcs are going to be under the opposite sprinklers arcs. And that may be confusing the way I said it, but I'll show you better graphics to describe that. So for good coverage, you definitely want 100% overlap of heads. So lack of 100% coverage may be due to improper head spacing, wrong spray head throw distance, too many heads or not enough heads, and water pressure. If your pressure is fluctuating, you may not be getting great uniform coverage, and that's what keeps our grass nice and green. All right, so better graphic to depict the head-to-head coverage than me trying to explain it. So you can see that they are overlapping. So this arc is 180 degrees, spraying 180 degrees. So then you have another one here across from it that's going to be getting under its arc as well. So they're all working together. You have 360s, you have 90s. So you just want to ensure all surfaces are getting covered, because if you took away those two 360s that are in the middle here, you would have these brown diamond spots in the middle of this yard. So just be sure that you are putting enough heads to get a nice coverage. All right, and here's another good graphic too. So you can see the arcs here, and this is good head-to-head coverage here because they're tapping underneath each other's arcs. All right, and so common types of irrigation heads. So we have rotary heads, referred to as rotors. Those are intended for larger turf areas. So not necessarily our yards, more so like a pasture or maybe a soccer field, things of that nature. And those rotate at a specified angle. So you can determine that yourself. You can set your nozzle to a certain angle at which you would like it to emit. But these do use more water, and they typically require a longer run time. And now we have the spray heads, probably the most common I see. Those are stationary, and they just emit kind of like a fan. So those also can be at 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 360 degrees. And that is going to be more practical for your average lawn. Because if we have all these funky shapes of turf here, you know, these rotors are getting into the landscape bed, but if you had a spray head there, it'd be more so focused on the turf area. So we like to see the spray heads in the lawns better than the rotors, more efficient, more practical. All right, so a little bit more about spray heads. And they're non-rotating, but you can actually get a variety of patterns of these guys. Usually have easy to assemble nozzle tops. So you can see it's kind of like a fan. This one's about 180 degrees. And you can see that it's getting this little turf area pretty nicely in their yard, not too much on the landscape bed. But this is just going to be more practical, especially for small strips of areas. You have different heads, side strips, end strips, that'll kind of spray out more like a bow tie, those S strips. The side strips will be better for those sidewalk areas. All right, so these are best placed about 8 to 15 feet apart, and they are going to be working the best. They're going to apply water more efficiently at 25 to 30 psi. So make sure that you're pressure in that zone is going to be adequate for those spray heads. For smaller curved areas, and precipitation rates approximately 2 inches per hour. So you don't need a pressure reducer like micro usually for these guys, and we recommend about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of these in each zone to water, based on your soil type. All right, and so your rotors, the rotating sprinklers for larger lawns, these are operating at a higher pressure and disperse water in an arcing stream type jet. So it's more so of like a line that's rotating. So it takes a bit longer for it to apply that 3/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch of water because it is emitting kind of like a stream. And for rotors, you typically want to space about 15 to 100 feet apart, depending on their throw distance. You can see in this picture up top here that you have one here low to the ground that's spraying. This is not the best instance for rotors because you have all these landscape plants, and these do not need water on their foliage. Landscape plants are much different than turf. They prefer to have water to be watered by their roots. Getting too much water on this foliage can cause disease and fungus. And you can see sometimes we like to raise our sprinklers as our plants grow, and that actually isn't doing too much for them. See this stream of water, it's getting picked up by wind and is just going into the atmosphere rather back to the turf where it should be. So moving this rotor out to the grass would be more efficient than just to raise it up high. The higher you raise your sprinkler, the more it's going to be watering the atmosphere. So just keep that in mind. And these have the best application at 45 psi or higher, so they require more pressure than your spray head. You're not going to be able to put as many rotors in a zone as you are a spray head, just because of the amount of pressure each rotor will take. And like I said, these are for large open areas. And it's about 1/2 inch per hour precipitation rate compared to the 2 inch per hour as the spray heads were. All right, so rotor anatomy, let's dissect it. Water flows through it, obviously, but I do want to point out something that a lot of people may not know is these have built-in filters. They're like a little basket, kind of like your pool filter. And so you can actually open up your rotor and pull that out and clean it out. These have a spring in them. You can see the coils here that causes it to spring up. But this is easily to disassemble and clean out. So make sure you do that if you see that it's not emitting properly like it used to. All right, and so adjusting your rotors. So if you want something to have a better arc length or radius, if you want to change it from a 90 to a 180, you can adjust the screw on top of the nozzle. Of course, each brand of sprinkler is going to be different. So refer to the manual on there, check the manufacturer's website to learn how to do it on your exact model. But usually it's just a little adjustment on the head. All right, so let's go into micro irrigation. So there's 4 varieties that we see of micro irrigation. And like I said, this is intended for landscape beds, landscape plants. You have micro sprayers, usually installed on stakes. You have little drippers that literally just drip out the water, shrublers or micro bubblers. Kind of reminds me of those big umbrella water fountain things you see at water parks, but that will disperse water in different directions. And then you have drip tubing. This is the one we like to see a lot of because it really does just water at the root zone. It is a line with holes in it and it just kind of leaks out water little by little. And it's usually buried underneath mulch so you don't see it. All right, so microspray sprinklers. You have different types of emitters. There's different nozzles on top that you can attach. You can see this one up top is emitting at 180 degrees versus this one at the bottom is kind of down spurting at 360 degrees. So these are still watering on your foliage. So just pay attention to your plants and learn what they like. But these can be good, but just be careful watering the foliage itself because that can welcome pests and fungus. And so these do wet larger surface areas in landscapes. So if you do mass planting and you have a bunch of new ones, you may want to consider these. But they're usually on stakes or risers, and it's much easier to see these in the landscape rather than your drip tube. These usually are not hiding. All right, and here is another sprayer, and we're gonna dissect that. So you have your distribution tubing, that's where your water's flowing from. And then you have your spaghetti tubing that is feeding the head itself. Your support stake, so it's not just flopping on the ground there. It's got a direction it's pointing towards. And you have your emitter that is emitting the water. All right, and you also have these little drippers, and they just kind of leak out the water. They'll usually be on top of the mulch areas. You'll usually see these in the landscape, kind of just like this one all the way on the right. But this just kind of drips. All right. And so like I said earlier, the best use for micro irrigation is in landscape to water flowers, shrubs, or trees separately from grass. If you try to use this for your grass will probably die. It won't be too happy with that. It likes a lot more water than these landscape plants do. So you can see this drip tubing on the right laid out, sprawling. So it's getting those root zones efficiently watered. And then over to the left, you can see the micro bubbler emitting water, kind of like the star. Okay, now we're going to go into some what we like to call bloopers. These are broken sprinkler heads. So we all know that this can cost us a lot of money. We definitely want to inspect our systems for breaks, leaks, things of that nature that can really ramp up your bill. Out in the field, we call these geysers. The nozzles have been popped off. There's been line breaks. It's just, you know, not watering much. That one's watering the road. So these are definitely something you want to look out for. Listen for leaks, touch, walk around your grass. If you feel it's really swampy and it's puddling up a lot, that can be an indicator that you have some sort of underground leak or break. So like I said earlier, be sure that you are checking your system for any breaks or leaks. All right, and here we have some more. We have some leaks and broken piping. So these still have their nozzles and they look, if you were to look at this one on the right at first glance, you'd say, oh, it looks like it's working pretty well, but no, it's not. You see a lot of this runoff here, that's an indicator of some sort of underground piping that has broken. And that is very common at the edge of driveways or heads that are along the road. Whether a car has run over it, a lawnmower, that's something very common we see. So be sure you're checking on things. And I have a video here you can see. You can see that is just a huge, huge amount of water. And imagine that is potable water. What a waste. That is such a waste. So that sidewalk is also getting a lot of water, and we know that sidewalks don't grow just because you water them. They might get mildew on them and you might slip on them, so just be careful. All right, and here is another break. This isn't a landscape bed. I'm not sure what happened here along the side of the house, but this is a major break at the connection there. And there's water all in this bed, and I'm sure that is not very fun to replace these plants and to pay that water bill if they have one. All right, and here's another one. So if you ever are in your yard and you walk out and it's a puddle like this, you should be a little concerned. It's one thing if it's been a heavy rain, but if it has not been raining and you see this puddling action, you definitely should run your irrigation system and check it out. You can see there's a nearby break. This head here is not popping up. So when you do get these breaks, this is messing up your pressure. It's not, all of your heads aren't going to be able to pop up because that break is stealing all the pressure. And so you can see that spray head in the corner there is not popping up because there is that break. So just be sure that you are inspecting your landscape for breaks, leaks, because you may have to replace plants or turf. That costs a lot of money, or you're paying a super high water bill. Something that isn't, as dangerous, but, is something to be concerned about is blocked spray patterns. So you want to ensure that your spray heads are able to do their jobs. So placing donuts around your sprinklers, whether they're rotors, whether they're spray heads, that will kind of help tame the grass around that area and signal to your lawn service that, hey, there's a sprinkler here, watch out. Because on the right here, you see that this one the turf has grown over it. It's blocked by it. It's causing it to mist, and that water is going into the atmosphere, not necessarily applying to the grass too much. A lot of the time too, we see that sprinklers are blocked by plants. So there's been some overgrowth here, and it's not really getting to the grass. It's being blocked by these leaves and vines and whatnot. And this one here too, it looks like it's turned the wrong way, but it is being blocked by this little, I think, a juniper. So just make sure that none of your heads are blocked as well, because that will also impact your landscape. All right, and here's a good one. This is a great example of why you should not put your rotors or spray heads in landscape beds. Move them out to the turf. Let's take a peek. All right, and so, yep, we have this planter here that is blocking it. And those flowers are going to have to be changed out because that irrigation is really beating it up. So also keep in mind moving heads out of landscape beds, moving them to the turf so they can do their job properly, and that is to water turf, not landscape plants. Another thing we encounter is overspray. Kind of mentioned a little bit about that, watering the sidewalk there. Make sure that your heads are faced to the turf and that they're not angled towards your sidewalk. Breaks and leaks too can cause you to water hard surfaces. But this is a really common thing we see is our sprinklers spraying onto driveways, onto the side of houses, onto driveways and landscape beds. So be sure that you're not causing that overspray, because that is a waste of water. All right, and we are wrapping this up. That concludes my presentation, but this is your sign to check your irrigation system and to book an appointment with the Mobile Irrigation Lab. It is a free service, and we would be so happy to come and inspect your system for you. So please book an appointment with us, and check out your irrigation system, see how it's running, see how everything looks in your landscape. Make sure your heads aren't blocked, make sure it's getting adequate pressure, and that you have the correct spray heads for your zones. And if you would like any further information, we have some great resources for you. UF Publications, solutionsforyourlife.com. You can go ask questions. And if you go to Google and type in Ask IFAS, it'll bring you to a great webpage where you can literally just type in whatever you want. And it'll bring you a string of publications. It's basically like UF's Google. Here are some manufacturer websites that you can check out. Go check out and see what your controller is. See if it's a Rainbird, see if it's a Hunter, and go to that manufacturer's website and find your manual. And also watermatters.org, that's for SwiftMud, Southwest Florida Water Management District. They have some information on there about watering restrictions and things of that nature. And of course, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. I will stay on here for about 5 minutes or so for any questions, but I work under Michelle Atkinson. She is the Environmental Horticulture Agent at the Manatee County Extension Service. And again, I'm Maggie Gaughan, the Water Conservation Program Assistant. So if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really nice having you all, and take a look out for future webinars that we are having. And thank you for your time today. All right, I have some questions here. How long do you drip line? That is something I cannot answer for you off the top of my head. That will need some math done. If you email me, I can help you figure it out. But that's depending on the feet of drip line you have and the square footage of your landscape bed or wherever it is. So that takes a little bit of math. So if you want to email me, I can try to help you figure that out. All right, and then how do I book an appointment? That is a great question. I did not tell you, did I? So book an appointment, you can call 941-722-4524. And that automated service will direct you to booking an appointment with mobile irrigation appointments. So call that number 941-722-4524 and it'll direct you to booking an appointment with the mobile irrigation lab. All right. My valves are underwater. Is that normal? I would say that's not normal. I would say that needs to be checked out. Your valves are underwater. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be. I don't think that is. I don't know. Is your irrigation system working correctly? I don't know if that should, I don't think that's normal. But email me and I can help you out with that. Can you use the non-potable water for an irrigation system? Yes, you absolutely can. You can absolutely use non-potable water for irrigation system. It's actually now a code. It's a builder's code now that they must use the lowest form of water for irrigation. So a lot of the new homes are hooked up to reclaimed water or pond water. So yes, you can use non-potable water for your irrigation system. All right. Yes, Lakewood Ranch uses either pond water or reclaimed water, depending on how old the development is. But typically, yes, Lakewood Ranch is using reclaimed water or water from the ponds. So the valve box is always full of water. Now, I would be concerned if they're electrical. If they're manual, it may be okay. You want to make sure that the balls of the valves aren't getting moldy or rotted. I would check on those to make sure that they're okay. Make sure that the wear and tear is all right. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate all your questions. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Please take down my email. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All right, thank you all.
Hey.
Hey.
I removed the other people that was lingering.
Thank you.
If you do not mind, when I hit record, it was like a 5-second lag, and the whole like introduction of yourself didn't get captured. So I was wondering, I can cut all this out of the video. If you can just put on the very front presentation and do the introduction of you and Valerie again, and then what you're going, just for 3 minutes, and then I can add that to the beginning of the presentation so we don't have to redo the whole thing. If you would not mind to do that, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm sorry. The recording thing, it did catch me off guard. I saw and I was like, oh,
I know. And I hit, when you clicked on, I waited 3 seconds to hit it, but you automatically started. And then when I hit it, it was another so many seconds. So I kind of wasn't prepared. And then
that's okay.
But okay, so if you want to put on the front cover of your presentation and just introduce yourself, and I think you did you and Valerie of what you guys do, and then I can push that into the beginning.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Do I have to put my video on? Do you want me to put my video on or no?
I would, and then that way it's consistent with the video.
Okay. All right. Let me go to the top. All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the Basic Irrigation Operation and Maintenance webinar. I am Maggie Gahn. I'm the Water Conservation Program Assistant for the Manatee County Extension Service. I work with Michelle Atkinson, the Horticulture Agent at the Manatee Extension Service, and Valerie Massey. She is the Landscape. I'm sorry, Dina, I got nervous. Can I start over?
You want to start where you said?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. No problem. I can cut it all out. So just go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Maggie Gahn. I am the Water Conservation Program Assistant for Manatee County's Extension Service, and welcome to our Basic Irrigation Operation and Maintenance webinar. Thank you for joining us today. I work with the Mobile Irrigation Lab, and that is made up of myself, Valerie Massey, our landscape program assistant, and Michelle Atkinson, our horticulture agent. Wait, hold on. Let me do it again. The environmental horticulture agent, extension agent. Okay. Good morning. Dina, this is making me nervous.
It's okay. And Michelle said that you can tell her or say that she walked in. She was actually not in here for like 30 minutes. But she heard you because it was on her computer, but you can actually say she's environmental horticulture agent. So whatever you want. But I did miss like the first snip. So if you
Okay.
do this, it's going to be helpful. And all you
Okay.
have to do is you don't even have to say good morning. Say, thank you everyone for joining me. I'm Maggie, thank you, whatever.
Okay. All right.
So don't be nervous. You're only like 15 seconds into being over.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Action.
You got it.